Hello everyone and welcome. This is Marika and today I'm gonna make this one layer card here featuring Fresh Freesia set from Altenew. I'll use a couple of masking techniques which I'm gonna walk you through, and then I'm gonna show you the steps that you need to take if you want to color this flower the way I've colored it today. I'm using Copic markers and no line coloring technique. When you're using masking techniques, at first you want to stamp the image that you want to have on top. I used light pigment inks to ink up my stamp since I'm doing no line coloring with Copic markers. I used candlewood ink to ink up my flower pod and newsprout ink to ink up my stem and leaves. For the second image, I only want to use the two biggest flowers, and so before adding the ink, I mask off the parts that I don't want to get stamped onto my paper. Before doing this, I cleaned up my stamp very well. And then since I want the two flowers to appear behind the firstly stamped ones, I cut a mask out of post-it note and placed it onto my stamped image. I use the same inks to stamp my flowers, and I let the flowers to overlap a little bit to gain more of a look that these two flowers are behind the first ones. And when you remove the masks, it'll look like this. Now we're ready to color these flowers. It took a total of 2 hours for me to color this flower bouquet. I'm not gonna show you all of it, I'm just gonna walk you through with a couple of the petals and share some thoughts what I had in mind while coloring this. I list all the colors that I used in the upper left corner for your convenience. When I color flowers, before I start adding color, I try to imagine in my head which direction the petal curves, and I try to add my brush strokes in that direction. That way you are able to do two things at the same time, adding color and achieve the shape of your image. I usually start with a lighter color and try out if I like the shades that I've put down. If you start with a lighter color and you don't like what you've colored, you can always go on top of it with a darker color and hide your first layer. What I've learned while coloring, I usually lay the darkest colors to the parts which are the most deepest. As in here, the center of the flower sinks in, so I add the darkest green over there. I use the same idea with the outer edge of the petals. The highlight is the most near you, so it will be the lightest, and the outer edges of the petals will be more further from you, so I used darker colors over there. Through the entire flower, I use flicking motion and very light hand to be able to maintain as many details as possible. I used the same coloring idea for all the petals, so now I'll let you enjoy the coloring. I'll be back when we're ready to add another layer and more details to these flowers. Okay, now the first layer is done. Between the two layers I colored the first layer of the stem and the flower buds to let the first layer of flowers to dry between. What I've learned while coloring with Copics, if you want to maintain some of your details, you may want to let the layers dry between. If the first layer is still wet, the colors will blend and you may lose some of your details. When you color stems, you want to achieve roundness, and to do that you need to add contrast. I laid down my base color and then I start to add contrast and details to get it look more realistic. I use the same rule here. What is further away from me, I use more darker color. What is closer, I use lighter color. Now we can add more details and more contrast to the flowers to gain more dimension. I add a little bit of this very dark green to the most deepest parts of the flower centers. I also add that to the parts that are behind another petal. Then I use my medium color and sometimes tip to tip technique to blend it, not much since I want those details to stay. When you add details with a very dark color, you want to add it very sparingly to avoid it become too dark. With this, less is usually more and you can always add more later if it feels that more contrast needs to be added. I used my Copic multiliner 0.1 to draw the center of the flowers back. In real life they are not black, but I wanted to add more contrast to the center of the flowers and this was easy way to do so. And since this flower took so long to color, I kept the card otherwise very clean and simple. I only added some wild honey distress ink to the bottom of my card front with my mini ink blending tool. Then I used Altenew jet black ink to stamp my sentiment, which I couldn't get stamped evenly. Well, things happen, and since this is a handmade card, I just used my Copic multiliner to correct the parts that were missing. Hopefully you enjoyed watching this video and found it helpful. I list all the products that I use to my blog and the link will be at the description below. Please visit Altenew blog for more inspiration. Thank you very much for your time. See you soon. Bye!